Good morning. Welcome to Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room, where a team of specialists is on duty keeping an eye on the operation of the space station's systems and standing by to assist the Expedition 54 astronauts and cosmonauts with their tasks as they finish up their first work week of 2018. Counting these 6 crew members, there have been 230 different human beings who have been on board this vehicle since the crew of Space Shuttle mission STS-88 first opened the hatches on orbit. 196 of them have made their first entry in the last 207 months. That's the time since the Expedition 1 crew arrived in November of 2000. My colleague Dan Hewitt and the Space to Ground team have put together some other impressive numbers about the year in space just concluded and the year just underway.
17 different astronauts and cosmonauts called the station home in 2017, including NASA's Peggy Whitson, who became the record holder for time in space among U.S. astronauts with 665 days spent in orbit. More than 120 new U.S. research investigations were conducted this year, including tests of a drug to help fight cancer, an external payload looking at neutron stars that could one day map the galaxy, and even a breakthrough new process to identify microbes living inside the station. And like most years, there were tons of launches, spacewalks, and more. 4 Soyuz crafts launched humans to the station, with crew members coming from the US, Russia, Japan, and Italy. The most recent arrived just in time to close out the year, with Scott Tingle, Anton Shkaplerov, and Norishige Kanai docking on December 19th. 9 cargo vehicles carried supplies to the station in 2017, including 4 SpaceX Dragons, 2 orbital ATK Cygnuses, and 3 Russian Progresses. 10 spacewalks also took place, installing new batteries, replacing part of the station's robotic arm, and performing a number of station upgrades. 2018 is shaping up to be a transformational year on station, with some long-awaited tests on the horizon. There will be 2 major spacewalks to kick off the new year, with Expedition 54 crew replacing one end of the Canadarm2 robotic arm. Then in March, NASA astronaut Ricky Arnold will launch to continue the Year of Education on Station, a year-long stint with former educators turned astronauts, bringing the wonders of station to students back on Earth that started in September when Joe Acaba arrived on board. With another 4 crew launches and as many as 9 cargo launches spread across the station partnership, it will certainly be a busy traffic year. And most exciting of all, 2 U.S. commercial companies are still targeting 2018 for the first flights of their brand new spacecraft, returning human launches once again to American soil.
2017 was a robust year for research aboard Earth's only microgravity laboratory. Dan mentioned that 120 new scientific investigations were conducted during the year. That's on top of the hundreds of others that had begun earlier. The International Space Station hosts more than 300 experiments during any given expedition, each working to further space exploration or benefit life back on Earth, or both. Here's a look back at just some of the science that happened on the orbiting laboratory in 2017. One aspect of International Space Station research is learning how to make missions to deep space safe and successful journeys for the human explorers by learning how the human body reacts in the space environment and how we can provide the supplies those explorers will need on missions that will last years. Supplies such as fresh food.
Space gardening. Presented by Science at NASA. Roman statesman Marcus Tullius Cicero said, "If you have a garden and a library, you have everything you need." Humans attempting someday to make Mars their home may well share the sentiments expressed by the orator from ancient Rome. As for the library, books can now be stored digitally. But how does your garden grow in space? To find out, scientists have been studying plant growth on the International Space Station, or ISS. The results could help boost the productivity of both extraterrestrial and earthly gardens. Recently, the ISS has been home to some impressive harvests, yielding tasty snacks for crew members. However, scientists aren't through trying to unlock the secrets of how plants grow away from home. Future space outpost dwellers will need to grow plants for food and for recycling air and water, says Annalisa Paul of the University of Florida. So we're studying how plants adapt to the spaceflight environment. Our findings will also help us understand how plants might respond to new and challenging environments here on Earth. Paul and her colleague Robert Furl have been growing plants in space since 1999, when they launched their first experiment on Space Shuttle Columbia. Several space station experiments followed. One of their most compelling discoveries was that certain root growth strategies assumed to require gravity really don't. Plant roots seek water and nutrients by growing away from where they're planted. To determine which direction to grow, terrestrial plants use gravity as a cue, and they use touch to maneuver around obstacles. In the late 1800s, Charles Darwin demonstrated that plants growing along a tilted surface don't send their roots directly away from the seed, but instead send them to the right or left. He hypothesized that this growing pattern, called skewing, was caused by a combination of the roots touching their way across the slanted surface and gravity pulling straight down on them. In an experiment in 2010, Paul and Furl discovered, however, that roots of plants growing in microgravity on the station skewed like their earthly counterparts. The ISS showed us something we never would have known otherwise, notes Paul. Gravity isn't essential in root orientation. Good news. That's one less impediment to growing plants in space. Plants will efficiently seek the nutrients they need without gravity as a cue. The experiment also studied the patterns of genetic expression. Space plants changed the way they expressed their genes in order to produce specific proteins helpful in zero gravity. Paul explains, when living organisms are faced with environmental change, their response almost always involves a change in genetic expression. To cope, they switch on and off certain genes. Plants are pros at this. Paul says, plants' cell walls undergo a kind of remodeling in space. The genes associated with a cell wall are often in the opposite switch positions than they're in on Earth. The researchers aren't yet sure what purpose this serves, but they intend to find out with additional experiments. Paul and Furl aren't alone. Many other scientists have also been studying plant growth on the space station to unlock the secrets of successfully growing plants in this novel environment. At the heart of all the research is the quest to provide humans with everything they need, wherever they may be. For more about gardening in space, visit www.nasa.gov/station. For more on the growth of science both on and off our home planet, visit science.nasa.gov.
Along with being the lab assistants for much of the scientific research, The crew members on the International Space Station are the subjects of some space station experiments. For example, there's one experiment in which scientists are looking into how the 3 pounds of bacteria in a person's gut impacts their health. Researchers are trying to find out if those bacteria could pose a threat to astronauts on long missions out into the solar system.
It's thought that there are 10 times more bacteria in our gut than there are cells in our entire body. There's like 3 pounds of this bacteria in our gut, the size of our brain. We know that the composition of the bacteria in the gut is related to a wide variety of diseases, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. Once we started sequencing everything that was in there, we found we were just shocked. If you go into a rainforest and you just look at thousands and thousands of plant and animal species in the rainforest, that's what you've got in your gut. We need to find out what is the effect of the space environment. And so Scott was the wonderful opportunity because he was up there for a year. If there's no changes in the microbiota from the beginning to the end of the mission, that's a good sign that we don't have to worry maybe about the fact that going to Mars and back over a 2-year period is going to be a problem. But if we find that there are certain bacteria that are outcompeting other bacteria in the zero-gravity radiation environment, well, we've got to perhaps come up with countermeasures then.
When he arrived on the International Space Station last summer, 115 days ago, flight engineer Mark Vande Hei was the only crew member with no previous spaceflight experience. But the Virginia native, who grew up in New Jersey and Minnesota, had plenty of other experience, having been an Army officer since 1989. A combat engineer who taught physics at West Point before reporting to NASA in Houston to serve as a spacecraft communicator. And that was before being selected as an astronaut in 2009.
So I always, as a kid, I never would have told anybody that I wanted to be an astronaut. My attitude about that was like saying, I want to be Spider-Man or I want to be a superhero. I always thought that working at NASA would be amazing because my physics background, the photography you see from space, and the knowledge that we're kind of pushing the limits with our space program. All those things made NASA seem very appealing to me. The fact that I got to be an astronaut is gravy. And now my attitude about actually being an astronaut, actually getting to go to space, that's all just, I keep getting these bonus deals that are even better and better. So I'm pretty excited about it. The thing about physics that I really like is it takes what we know, figures out a mathematical model for it, and then you can use that to try to get to what we don't know and theorize about things. It helps us imagine things that we can't even sometimes use instruments yet to detect, and then science follows up with that to try to do experiments and try to test theories we come up with. So certainly being able to contribute to science, the space station's all about science, and it's helping NASA further our exploration goals. I really think we have to keep exploring. Most of our nation's background involves people leaving what they were comfortable with and coming to a place that was new and different and very risky. So I think it's part of our national character to want to explore. Dedicating those resources to this peaceful endeavor that can actually help out all of humanity. My name is Mark Vande Hei, and I'm a NASA astronaut.
Along with the goals of individual science experiments, the International Space Station program has a long-term goal of getting human beings ready to go to Mars. For many of the people who are involved in that effort, that goal grew out of their exposure to another program, one they watched on television as children.
Space, the final frontier.
When Star Trek originally aired in 1966, NASA's space program was still in its infancy. But Star Trek allowed us to imagine what could be if we dared to boldly go where no one had gone before.
For most of us, the thought of traveling to another galaxy probably seems like science fiction. But the truth is, the foundation for humankind's journey beyond our solar system is being laid right now aboard our very own International Space Station.
On the original Star Trek TV series, space stations served as deep space research laboratories as well as rendezvous points where starships could dock before exploring the unknown.
Lieutenant, contact the space station.
Captain, the station is calling us.
All right, put them on.
When we were envisioning our own space station, the applications were similar.
The International Space Station is probably the most fantastic vehicle ever built.
It's a one-of-a-kind laboratory orbiting about 250 miles above the Earth.
And we perform experiments on the International Space Station.
We can do science, we can do experiments, we can learn how to do things out of this world.
And the result will help benefit the people on the ground.
And all of this data goes to further our knowledge of the universe, so.
But it's not just that. We are using the space station as a test bed for future space exploration.
It's to further our capabilities to travel in space and ultimately being able to leave this planet and go beyond as humankind.
It's not only part of our present, and certainly be part of our future.
We knew if we were going to continue with this mission of exploration, we needed to learn more about the human bodies and how to keep humans safe. So we have to understand what physiological changes occur to the human body when we're in space.
The crew of the Enterprise mastered artificial gravity, for the most part. We, however, aren't quite there yet, and that comes with its own set of challenges.
When you remove the force of gravity from your body, you'll lose things like muscle mass, bone density. Your heart doesn't have to work as hard.
Overcoming these challenges will become even more important when humans step foot on Mars, where the crew will have to be self-sufficient. But thanks to the International Space Station, we're able to study the effects of weightlessness and develop countermeasures in orbit, close to Earth.
That's the boy, keep it up.
The International Space Station isn't just providing insight into how our bodies adapt to spaceflight,
but we also knew we need to learn a lot more about living in space and how to be self-sufficient to take care of our crews as they went on a deep space journey.
For deep space missions, we still have a lot to learn.
We need to find out how to mitigate these limitations that we have. And that's exactly what we're doing on the space station.
The ISS is the only laboratory available to test life support systems, crew health systems, habitat modules, and other technologies that would help astronauts be safe and productive on a deep space journey.
Do you wish that the first Apollo mission hadn't reached the moon, or that we hadn't gone on to Mars and then to the nearest star?
Those are the imaginative things that NASA are looking at. That's every bit as passionately imaginative as science fiction.
I personally think that we are at a moment in the history of the human race where we are ready to leap forward, leap out of this planet.
And I think it's in our evolutionary creed that we have a manifest destiny to go into space and to find new worlds to live in.
So every step we take, we're just getting further and further into space and becoming more and more like Star Trek.
And just like Star Trek, our journey will never end.
Even though we've been sending humans into space for over 50 years, it is still just the beginning. Someday, far into the future, we'll look back and recognize the pivotal role the International Space Station played in humankind's deep space exploration. Given enough time and ingenuity, who knows where our imaginations will take us.
The Johnson Space Center is not just the home of human spaceflight in America. Extraterrestrial materials have called JSC home since Apollo missions returned samples from the moon, and we're still adding to the collection. When JSC planetary scientist Dave Middlefelt of the Astromaterials Research and Exploration Science Division left on his 5th trip to Antarctica to look for meteorites that can teach us about the formation of the solar system and the evolution of the moon and Mars, we went to see what does one pack in the way of personal items for a trip to the bottom of the world.
name's Dave Middlefelt. Everyone knows me as Duck, so you can feel free to refer to me by that name. I'm a planetary scientist working with NASA Johnson Space Center. I've been doing planetary research basically almost all my career since the mid-70s on, and I'm about to get ready to go to Antarctica, so I've got to make sure I've got all the items I need. We're down there to collect meteorites that have been falling on Antarctica all over the place. These rocks are basically a poor man's space probe. For fairly low expense, we can sample a multitude of bodies in the solar system, and by studying them in the lab, we can then learn quite a bit about the formation of the solar system, and for the Moon and Mars, how those bodies evolved over geologic time. Christchurch is just in late spring, going on to summer, so I've got to make sure I've got shorts, t-shirts, and sandals available, because I don't want to be wearing sweatshirts, flannel shirts, and that sort of thing in 90 degrees in New Zealand. When you're in Christchurch, New Zealand, you get almost all of the ECW, or extreme cold weather gear, you need from the Antarctic terminal in Christchurch, New Zealand. So I don't need to worry about heavy boots for out in the field. I don't need to worry about fleece layers. I don't need to worry about parkas. But what I do need to take is some personal gear, woolen socks. These will keep my feet warm in my boots. They look kind of small, but they work. I only have one pair with me, and the reason is because I shipped my own personal ECW gear out from Houston, so it's already in McMurdo waiting for me. I do have to have one set because they will not let you on the plane from Christchurch to McMurdo Station if you don't have the proper ECW gear with you. One pair of expedition weight thermal underwear, and I've got, I think I took shipped 4 other pair down there, so I'm all set. McMurdo Station is, it's going to be cold down there. It is the summer. Temperatures will be below freezing almost the entire time. But it's not like you're out in the middle of nowhere. You're kind of in any town in Minnesota in the winter. So you want to have stuff to keep warm outside. So I might include a fleece pullover. That's always good to have. You need flannel shirts. The other thing is you need a good pair of hiking boots. These are mine. The dust there is from Death Valley. I was there last March. Now, sleeping in the tent in Antarctica, you're sleeping in a sleeping bag. The only time I really change down there is at night. I shed my daytime clothes and wear what I'm going to sleep in. What I like is a sweatshirt and basically some kind of running pants type things that are warm. The sun's up 24/7. So what I do is I take a heavy knit hat. You need to keep your head warm when you're sleeping, and then I just pull it over my eyes and it's dark and I can go to sleep, no problems. I can't do without coffee, but I'm not going to drink instant coffee. So this is a coffee cone. I will ship this. Actually, I'll take this with me. And cone filters. I've also already shipped cans of coffee already ground that I like, so I can enjoy all the comforts of home minus the heat while I'm in Antarctica. One of the things you probably never thought about for Antarctica is sunburn. Like I said, the sun's up 24/7. The scene around you is extremely bright. It's all ice, light blue ice or white snow. Sunlight reflects off of all of that, and even though the sun is at a low angle to the horizon, you can get a wicked sunburn on anything that's exposed. The other thing you need, these are my glacier glasses. I bought these, the frames, and had my prescription put in them. They come with side shields. They're very dark, so when I put them on, basically the light is blocked all the way around. That way I won't get snow blindness. One of the times I was down there, this would have been in 2001 trip, we spent 4 days solid stuck in our tents with basically hurricane force winds blowing. So we didn't go out unless we had to, and we certainly didn't go out and work. So you need something to read. The advantage of this is that this right here, which weighs almost nothing, is equivalent to, a whole suitcase full of books. Sometimes power is at a short supply. We take solar panels so that I can recharge my Kindle, but sometimes you need paper copies, so I like taking cryptogram books. They occupy my mind. I lived in Israel for 6 years. I'm taking a novel in Hebrew and an English-Hebrew dictionary. This time, if we have tent days, I'm going to try and refresh my memory on how to read Hebrew. Everything is frozen, no surprise there. The good news is you don't have to refrigerate anything. You just leave it in a box outside your tent, and it'll stay nicely frozen the whole time. You never have to worry about it. There's tons of water all around you. If you want to make a cup of coffee, the first thing you do is you go outside your tent, chip a block of ice, put it in a pot, turn on the gas stove, and wait until the ice melts and then boils, and then you can make yourself a cup of coffee. But there's no shortage of water out there, that's for sure. Come about 4 or 5 months from now, we'll hopefully bring back maybe 1,000 new meteorites here, store them over there in Building 31 North, and then have them go through processing and distribution to scientists for study. This is going to be an exciting time. I'm looking forward to it.
If you'd like another look at any of the stories we featured today, check us out on YouTube and on Facebook on the addresses that are going to pop up there on your NASA TV screen in just a second. While you're there, take a look at all the other great stuff that we have there about NASA and America's human spaceflight program. If you're interested in a good conversation about space exploration, check out Houston, We Have a Podcast, featuring folks here at NASA talking about their work and their personal experiences on the job. New episodes go up on Fridays. Today, January 5th, my colleague Gary Jordan talks with Bill Foster, a longtime member of the ground control flight control team in Mission Control. They'll talk about how space communication works today and what it may look like in the future. Go to www.nasa.gov/Johnson/HWHAP, as in Houston, We Have a Podcast. You'll find all the episodes there. You can listen there on nasa.gov, also on SoundCloud and on iTunes. This is Mission Control, Houston.